least for me.
Geshe, I think, is particularly interesting because it must be a fine line between making music that will not antagonize Western ears, but seem Eastern enough to feel right for the period and the place.
Can't speak for the Japanese audience. I don't know what their sensibility would be. But we particularly made the decision, Rob Marshall, the director, and myself, to try to, in a certain sense, look for universalisms in the expression of this music. I think 90 minutes, or maybe might have been more than that, of purely ethnic music. I don't think it would have supported the atmosphere and the emotion in the way that most worldwide audiences, even if we eliminate the Japanese ones. It was an attempt, first of all, not to make a documentary. I have so much admire Kurosawa's films, and particularly Takamitsu's music, that some of which I've recorded and performed and know well. This was an opportunity to search for those broader universalisms in expression that can be found in music, colored with Orientalisms and timbral elements, i.e. koto, biwa, shakuhachi, etc., shamisen, and so on, taiko drums, all the Japanese ethnic instruments that most of us know. Fortunately, there are players playing those instruments now that know the Western disciplines. Kotos were most difficult. Metric, not so much in the intervallic notation, but the metrics with the orchestra were difficult. But the challenge, everyone here probably knows well the Norton lectures of Bernstein, the Mustang books, the Sage at Harvard. If you don't have them, you can buy them if you want to have those. Because there's a whole meaning given to Noam Chomsky and his search for universalisms in language. And the most he can find, I think, after years and years of work, is that mama is about as close as a universal. And he says he feels it's something to do with breastfeeding and the mouth of the baby and forming the shape it does. So mama becomes a request for food or a demand for it. It becomes the one universal in language we seem to all agree about. But music itself, and the overtone series, as we all know, understand it, is universal. It's everywhere. It's in physics. It's what makes my voice go up to the room and sound the way it does. And so, acculturation and taste for European Western harmony and so on that's developed our sense of what's pretty, what isn't, what's ominous, or what's threatening, and so on, is the result of a lot of acculturation, but it's also connected with verifiable universalisms that exist in music that don't in language. So, by way of a description of at least a goal with geisha, or an aim with geisha, that explains why the cello, why the Italian violin played by a Russian Jewish violinist and a Chinese cellist, an American composer, and so on. A search for universalisms in music, I guess.
I'm curious about your Boston Pops tenure, because you were already a well-known film composer when you agreed to take the post of music director at Boston Pops in 1980. Why did you make that choice, and did it have any impact on your writing those 13 years?
Well, why the choice? I conducted in Boston in 1978, I think, as a guest. Mr. Fiedler was still alive. And once, or I think twice at the Hollywood Bowl when he came out here to conduct in 1979. You people, probably you're all young, you may remember Arthur Fiedler, who was conductor for 50 years of the Boston Pops, who was at that time, for those 50 years, other than Toscanini and Ferdinand, probably the most famous conductor in the world because of television and recording, and his abilities. And so I had some connection with the orchestra in Boston and a little bit of substituting for Fiedler here at the LA Philharmonic when he was ill. And the reason I substituted here, very simple. Ernst Fleischman was the manager of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. We needed a conductor in the afternoon because Fiedler couldn't do the show in the evening. And he said, all the professional conductors I know are busy, but we could probably get John Lynch because he won't be working. Or at least won't be working at night. So he called me and said, can you do this program without a rehearsal? It's Gershwin, Girl Crazy, and it's something else with Richard Rodgers and Carousel Waltz, and I don't know if we had a soloist or not. And I said, well, yeah, I guess I could do it. So I did that twice for her. And when Mr. Fiedler died at the end of '79, people in Boston called me and said, would you like to have the orchestra? This is like after conducting them twice. And they'd had a lot of other applicants who were very experienced and so on. And I thought, I've been cloistered in the movie studios for already 30 years, sitting at my piano, either in the orchestra or in the little cubby hole somewhere working. It might be nice, and the Boston Symphony Orchestra is a monumentally glorious instrument. The idea of getting out of the cloister and the privacy of that workroom and get as nervous as it made me, go before a live audience with a world-class orchestra, was a temptation I was just too vain to resist. and the other part of it was that, as Fleischman pointed out, I was not a professional conductor. I didn't have a career as a conductor. If it would be a flop, it wouldn't have particularly hurt my career. I mean, I was a professional composer and had no aspirations to earn a living or make a career as a conductor. So there was really nothing to lose from that point of view. Everything to be gained from the knowledge I would acquire in front of the orchestra, which certainly just, if it's knowledge or experience, whatever it is, has been great. Now I've been conducting the orchestra, as you mentioned, 14 years as a director of that, but 25 years now as Tanglewood in Boston. And whether it's affected my writing or not, I think the answer has to be yes. That when at least in terms of the thought that I have when I'm putting notes down on paper of the moment of realization of the orchestra, that my sense of balance is a little bit, I've had to correct balances of my own and other people's so many times that those flutes are just simply too low there if the strings are going to play mezzo piano. Everybody knows that. And you might as well say that whatever the particular situation is, of which there are thousands. So that in writing, you say, okay, this better be upper minor third then, if the accompaniment is going to be that dense or anywhere near that loud or that much bowing, or reduce the number of bow, or make it the second standard of the first, and some of these of balance, I think, particularly, that go with endless hours of rehearsing the orchestra to fix things that could have been fixed in writing. And that goes for every composer. As we all know, Stravinsky would go, and Brahms probably most famously, he would go to the bibliothèque at the next morning after every performance in Vienna and change something. So he's a little bit of story about Bernstein, who was always with us at Tanglewood. And every year he would conduct some of his pieces, and every year's conducting pops I had to do On the Town or something on his West Side, whatever it would be. And I remember being very frustrated at one rehearsal because there were so many marks on everyone's music. 2 bows on that one, piano. 1 bow over here, mezzo forte there. All in pencil. Nothing definitive in print. So I'd stop the orchestra and say, well, is it mezzo forte there or mezzo piano? And they said, we don't know. I said, well, what does Nani do when he conducts it? And they say, he does it differently every year. and when you think about it, you write a piece and you play it in Symphony Hall in Boston. That's one piece. It's one experience. And you take it to Blossom with the Cleveland Orchestra, and you find this is something else. And the bass section isn't as strong, or the acoustics are such that the brass sounds too bright, or it's not bright enough, or we never. The old cliche is that a work of art is never finished; it's only abandoned. And that is true. I mean, it can never be refined enough in terms of from performance point of view. And to the horror of most musicologists and most composers, almost all famous world conductors, all their careers have, in Berlioz, even in Beethoven, doubled the bass clarinet here, or took out the third trombone there, or done something, always in the bow, which changes everything in terms of volume, power, and dynamics, and bow speed, all of this. So yes, being on the podium of any orchestra is going to be the best orchestration lesson you could ever have. go back to my earlier comment about myself, piano, conducting, performance, being in a band, being in an orchestra. That is a writing education that is irreplaceable.
I've monopolized this. I have more questions, but I've monopolized this enough. Who's got a question out here to start off with? Yes?
I'd like to know your opinion on, because you came before 10 tracks, and how do you feel about those, and how do you work with those? Because you did it before and you do some with it. So.
Right, well, 10 tracks, as everybody probably knows, are soundtracks that editors and directors will put in as they cut their film. And when I started working in studios, I don't think we had 10 tracks that I remember. Kenny Hall is here. He's almost as much of a veteran as I am. And I think probably would be correct to say that you might have made a 10 track for a preview once in a while. A preview being that you take the film to Pasadena and run. And the composer never heard that. Kenny would have done it, and they'd run to Pasadena and be gone the next day. And so the composer's challenge always then, even more than now, is what can we put into this film that would be appropriate. I would say to you that I think the practice of making 10 tracks, which has gotten very prevalent, and they're used principally as film editorial tools. Editors will cut their film to a piece of Stravinsky and whatever, Bartok, anybody. And that, in my mind, I have to say, it's a little bit like artistic cheating in a sense. That you can take a work of a great master like Stravinsky, put any series of visuals against it, it would be a great piece of something. And so it's a great facilitator, but I think it's artistically less, can I say, less honest than it would be to say to a composer to conceive your own score. It's become such a prevalent practice. I try to ignore it as much as I possibly can. I have to say that on occasion there's a suggestion made that does make some sense. And in some areas it's horrific. And other people can be very good about it. I think it's here to stay. I'm sorry to say, and I think it would prompt me to speak to one of the big problems that we all have, and that has to do with power. And that when I grew up, the period that you referred to, pre-10 track, the editing was really supervised by the producer. The director went off and did another film someplace. Even if he was Hitchcock, he would come in later and make his comments. But that's not true anymore. The directors do everything. They have all the artistic clout, so to speak, and all the artistic power. And you get into difficulties with them and disagreements with them naturally because it's a collaborative art form. Some of them are better educated musically than others. Some of them are tinny-eared people whose needs and desires may fall short of what you hope to contribute. I've been very lucky. One of my collaborators has been Steven Spielberg for 32 or 3 years, who's extremely musical and very good, and we tinker around with tempos, sometimes just click tracks, even with the piano. And he will occasionally do the opposite of a 10 track, which has made me look very good on occasion. And that has been the most prominent example I can think of is the last 10 minutes of E.T., where the E.T. and his little earthling friends are trying to get to the spaceship at the end of the film, and they get on their bikes and they race the bikes, and they get the bikes going so fast that they get past the escape velocity speed, whatever that is, and they 35,000 miles an hour, whatever it is, to jump out of gravity and go over the moon, and you buy it, and you see the kids go by over the moon, and it lands, and it goes over speed bumps. Anyway, that's about 10 minutes of music. I tried to do all of it together, and each speed bump had a timpani hit, and the ramp up to the climb over the moon had an acceleration and a crescendo and key changes and all of this. and landing, and dialogue cues at the end, and E.T. says, "I'll be right here," and the piccolo plays a solo, and they fit all of it.